Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all joining our webinar today. I'll just give it like one more minute for more people to join. I know it's not always easy to find that join link in the emails. I know I quite often have to go searching for it, so we'll give people just a couple more minutes to jump in, and then we'll get started. Okay, maybe I can just get started with like the introduction while people join. Hello, my name is Emma. I am here covering for Julia this week or this month because she is currently taking some parental leave. So I'm here to take this month's accessibility webinar. And this is part 5 in the series. And we're going to be talking both about the European Accessibility Act and then a bit at the end about integrated testing. So if you're a developer, that might be of interest to you. And I have enabled the Q&A. So if you have any questions, there'll be a section for Q&A at the end. I know it usually says that you can ask questions in both English and German. Unfortunately, I can't speak German, so please don't ask me questions in German. I can speak Swedish, so if you want to ask me questions in Swedish and I'll translate them, we can do that instead. But yeah, please no German. What else is there to say? Yeah, I'm not very good at keeping an eye on the chat. So like, I hope that I can manage to do it, but I'm not a very good multitasker, so I'll let you know that now. But I can say I've seen Laura, hello, and Kathy, Iga, nice to see you all dropping in tonight. So let's get started, shall we? And I hope that my slide's going to work. There we go. So the agenda tonight is the first part. We're going to talk about the European Accessibility Act. I'm going to go into what it covers and then talk about some of the standards that help us to kind of check off what's in the Accessibility Act and help us with that. And then I'll talk also about monitoring and enforcement. And once we've done that, I'm going to go on to, it's a little bit disjointed, I guess, but integrated testing tools, how you can implement some tools into your code so that you can start testing for different kind of accessibility issues. And then at the end, there'll be time for questions. So as I said, pop your questions in the Q&A section and I'll try and answer those at the end. So let's start with the European Accessibility Act. And if we kind of take a step back from the European Accessibility Act and look at the legal timeline, it actually kind of started in 2006 with the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This is a very, very broad, generic and overarching convention that was signed or ratified by almost every country in the world. But there's not really things in it that you can go away and directly implement. The idea was that this is an anti-discrimination law and that then the countries that have signed it themselves will take it and go and make more specific laws. And in Europe, what happened was they took the UN Convention and first they focused on public digital services. And in 2021, they came out with the Web Accessibility Directive. So this has been in force for almost 5 years now. 4 years this year. And so all public services within the European Union are required to meet the requirements in the Web Accessibility Directive. And then since that, this year, we also have the European Accessibility Act coming. And this builds on the Web Accessibility Directive by broadening the law to also cover private digital services and products. And the aims of the European Accessibility Act are to kind of harmonize and provide a minimum standard of accessibility across all of the member states within the European Union. And also to promote cross-border trading within the EU. So more affordable and more widely available accessibility products will be available to everyone, hopefully. And they don't want to stop people from doing innovative things. So they have a focus on what you need to do and not how you do it. So they try to not be too prescriptive with how you fix things, but making sure that there's like a base level of things that you do and what you have to do to meet this minimum standard. And here are some of the things that are covered. It covers both products and services. Most of the things I'll be talking about later will be covering services because that's where the digital kind of lies, and that's my forte. But some of the products that are also covered are computers and operating systems, gaming consoles, ATMs and ticketing machines, smartphones and TV equipment. So any kind of equipment that falls into that category needs to be up to a certain standard. And then some of the services that are also covered in the new law are e-commerce, banking, transport, e-books, emergency services, and customer services. And although the European Accessibility Act doesn't directly refer to any standard itself, the European Commission has requested that there are some existing standards within the EU that are updated that can then be used for to kind of make sure people are complying with the law. And then there are also some new ones that they've requested. So they have requested that 3 existing standards are revised and updated. So one that most people have probably heard of is the EN 301549, and this is the one that has to do with accessibility requirements for ICT products and services. But there are also 2 others, EN 17161, which is to do with design for all, and EN 17210, which is more about the built environment, and they've also asked for those to be updated. And then they have also requested there 3 new standards be written. One is to do with non-ICT information related to products, so a lot to do with documentation. One to do with how to make support services related to all these products and services more accessible. So things like help desk, call centers, technical support, all of those now need to be accessible. And one to do with the accessibility of emergency communications, like when you ring 112 or 999 in the UK, that those kind of emergency communications are also accessible. And so the Web Accessibility Directive and the European Act together will both then rely on the EN 301549 standard for digital services. So the EN 301549, that is what specifies the accessibility requirements for digital products and services, as well as other things like hardware and software. And then in turn, the EN 301549 does refer to the global standard, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Level A and AA. But it's not just enough to fall back on the WCAG or the WCAG. There are extra requirements outside of the WCAG that are also required to be able to meet up to the level of the European Accessibility Act. So what's included in this standard? Well, it has 13 clauses and they refer to different things. So we have one referring to general ICT, which has some things that refer to everything, both apps and non-apps and websites and documents and all sorts of things. There's one specifically focusing on telephone relay services, which help like people that can't use a normal telephone if they need text services and that kind of thing. There's one section that talks about two-way video services. So it's important to know that there are extra requirements for video in certain circumstances. There's one that talks about hardware. And then the ones that we're probably going to be more interested in are web, documents and software. And there's also a couple of clauses for emergency services and customer services. It is classed as a voluntary standard, which means that you don't have to follow it, but most of the countries within the EU say that if you follow it, then there is presumed compliance with the law. But you can prove in other ways that you are also making your website accessible. The clauses for web documents and software, they currently refer to 2.1 of the WCAG standard, but there is an update coming later this year, or next year, I think, which will update it to refer to 2.2. So if you're working with clients, or if you're working yourself on developing new things, I would recommend that you already now follow the 2.2 standard, because it will be updated shortly. And then at the moment, it has some appendixes or annexes as well, where Annex A maps to the Web Accessibility Directives and the requirements there. That will probably be increased to include the European accessibility requirements as well, but we don't know yet. And then Annex C provides testing procedures for how to determine conformance. And this section is a little bit kind of sketchy. There's not that much information there at the moment. We're also hoping that that will be updated in the next iteration as well. So, as I said, update is expected early next year to include WCAG 2.2 and hopefully more detailed test procedures, because if the test procedures aren't the same in every country, then the law won't be harmonized as they're hoping. And as I said, if you conform to the standard, then it is presumed that you'll also comply to the law. It does also have some functional requirements, and this means basically whenever you're creating new digital products and services, you should be thinking of these kind of different groups of people. Is how will your product or service work for people with no vision, if they have limited vision, if they have no perception of color or limited perception of color? How would it work for if they have no hearing or limited hearing, if they have no voice, if they struggle with strength in their hands and that kind of thing, if they can't reach like forwards or sideways, if your app or product or service triggers seizures, how does it work for people with limited cognition? And you also need to include privacy in that, because you can't just say, oh, someone else can help them do this, because that breaches a person with disabilities, their privacy. They have as much right to privacy as anybody else. So those are the functional requirements. And as I said, it is just more than WCAG. So you can't just follow WCAG and hope for the best. There's 64 additional requirements. 42 of those apply to the web and 64 that apply to apps. And these include certain things like being able to activate accessible features in an accessible way. If you have biometrics, which means if you use any kind of fingerprinting or face scanning, voice recognition in your app, you have to have another way to be able to do that as well. Either two very different biometric ways, or one biometric and one non. You need to follow user preferences. You need to be able to embed. There's also requirements for embedded video players, supporting accessible content creation, preserving accessibility information when converting files. I think this is a big one for PDFs, and I think most of us know that if you try to create a PDF and then download it, most of the information doesn't get preserved, which is a shame. And there's also requirements for tactile and auditory feedback in apps. And then banks actually have an extra requirement, which is written itself into the EAA law. This is not in the standard, but it is part of the law, and that is that they also have to not like go over the B2, which is an upper intermediate language requirement, according to the Common European Reference Framework. This is kind of difficult to measure at the moment, because there's not an awful lot of information about what is a B2 level of text. Before it's been more to do with like people taking a test themselves, but now we're trying to use this Common European Framework to kind of describe a reading level instead. But at this level, most people can understand main ideas of a complex text and understand standard spoken English. Not English, it can be any language, sorry, and texts with a broad reading vocabulary. But if there's like very complex or specific words in there, which very often happens on banks, then you need to be explaining these different words so that people understand what they mean. And then we come to accessibility statements. So a statement should be published on websites or apps that list the known accessibility issues and provide contact information to report those issues. There's also ongoing work into what the format of this might be and whether it is a requirement in every country. Some countries have not decided this yet. Some countries have just said that the information should be available on request. Other countries are saying, no, we want you to have an accessibility statement. And this would be in line with the Web Accessibility Directive, which does require public services to have an accessibility statement on their website. But it's kind of unclear right now what this format will be and if it will be required in every country. But obviously, if you have an app or a service in several countries, then you're covering your bases if you have an accessibility statement available. And there's also talk of that this accessibility statement should probably be in the same language as the website itself, and it should include contact information if people want to report something. And then on to the monitoring and enforcement of the European Accessibility Act. So the idea is that each country will have its own monitoring and enforcement agencies, and that can be existing agencies or creating new agencies. And I'm sorry, I need to cough just a second. I'm just going to mute myself. Yes. So the requirement is that companies will need to notify monitoring agencies if they discover any issues themselves, but this could also be in the form of the accessibility statement. And what has been happening so far with the Web Accessibility Directive, which will probably be continuing with the new law as well, is that the monitoring agencies have been doing some like light audits or quick audits where they go through certain things, just like maybe pick out 10 or 20 things from the WCAG and go through them quickly and then inform companies. And then they pick out a few companies where they do a real deep dive and go through every single criteria. And that is probably because by doing deep dives, they can only do maybe 1 or 2 a month, depending on how many people work for them. Whereas the quick, like light audits, they can do many more and contact companies more quickly. The results of all of these audits will be communicated to the various companies, and if it's anything like the Web Accessibility Directive, they will probably be published online as well. And there is also a requirement to report back to the European Union about the results. And then often what happens is the companies will get their results and then there's a time limit imposed, like 3 to 6 months, where they have to make the improvements, and then the monitoring agencies will do like another quick check of what they found and if the results have improved or not. If companies do decide not to comply, there are various different things that can happen. Many are talking about fines, but there are some countries, such as Ireland, which have even talked about prison sentences. And it is also possible that the service might be removed from the European market until it is fixed. So there's various different things that can happen with that. And for more information in different languages, I would definitely recommend this link, which I'm going to see if I can actually copy and put in the chat because it's very long and I don't want to read it out. But the Accessible EU Centre have got PDF guides in like all the languages of the EU, so that if you want to go in and find out more information, they're about 22, 23 pages long, all of these documents, But if you find it easier to read through in a different language than English, then can definitely recommend looking at that. Okay, so that was the section about the European Accessibility Act, and now I'm going to move on to an entirely different subject and talk about integrated testing tools. So which tools am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about Eslint, Storybook, Jest, and Playwright. And I know these are not the only tools out there, but I can't sit and talk about everything. So I took like an example of things that I use regularly and things that can be really useful for accessibility testing. And in most of these cases, it's mostly about automatic tests. And I know Julia has talked about automatic tests in a previous webinar. And this is just a way to kind of get those automatic tests into an earlier stage of the development lifecycle. But then when I talk about Playwright, I'm also going to talk a little bit more about manual testing. So with Eslint, you can add a plugin, which is really nice, that checks for accessibility rules in JSX elements in React code bases. So you do need Eslint to be installed first, and then it has like a list of about 30 different problems which are directly related to your coding, and these will appear in your code editor as you type, which is really nice. So you can go back and fix it immediately. It picks up things such as missing alternative text. It will check if your ARIA attributes are valid. It will check if you've used valid autocompletes. If you've used like an on-click event on a div, it will pick that up. It will recognize if you miss like the HTML language attribute, and if you use things like positive title index. And you can find a list of all 30 of these on their Eslint page on NPM. Let me see if I can copy that link as well. Pop them all in the chat in case anyone's interested. And what you do with Eslint is you install it with npm install. You have to install Eslint first, then you install Eslint-plugin-jsx-a11y, and then you have to go in and add some things to your config file. And in there you can add individual rules and like be very specific that you only want it to check for alternative text, or you only want it to check your ARIA rules. But you can also tell it like follow all the recommended rules or follow all the strict rules. So it's got some really nice ways to configure it. And yeah, so that was Eslint, and as I said, that works directly in your coding editor at the time of coding. And then we have Storybook. Storybook is something you install into your project when you're working a lot with components. And I do believe that it's available for different frameworks, including React, Vue, and Angular. And it is based on Axe Core, which comes from DQ, and they base that on their like engine, which runs all of the automatic tests. So they can pick up, I mean, DQ say they can pick up around 57% of issues, probably more like 30%, but it detects various issues that can be found automatically based on this. And they have some accessibility documentation. Again, pop that in the chat. And installing the Storybook accessibility add-on is really nice nowadays. They actually have a very automatic process. So you type in npx storybook add at storybook/add-on-a11y, and it will guide you through and automatically install everything. However, if you do want more control, you want to manually adjust some things, then you can use npm install at storybook/add-on-a11y, and that will allow you to do things in a manual way. And then if you have done it in a manual way, you'll need to go and add the add-on into the configuration in Storybook. And you find your config file, and it should have something that's called add-ons. Wait, jump too fast. And you might already have other add-ons in here, but you just add the name of the add-on, and then you restart your project and it should appear. And what you should see then is when you have your component here, in the middle, you have like controls, interactions, and that kind of thing. You should then get a panel that's called accessibility, and it will tell you all the checks it's run, which violations exist. And if you open this up, it will give you a lot more information on where the issue comes from in the code, and maybe even how to fix it. It will tell you things that have passed, and it will even tell you if it's got things that you might need to check manually because it hasn't been able to go through everything and check it itself. So that's really nice as well. And then unit testing. With unit testing, we often use things like Jest or React Testing Library. So that's what I've written about here. Here we can add Axe add-ons again, based on the Axe plugin from DQ. There's also one called Pally or PA11Y, which I haven't used as much, but I've heard it's quite popular as well. And again, these perform automatic tests as part of your unit tests. So let me pop these links in the chat. And here I'm going to go through how to use Jest Axe, but Jest Pally is also very, very similar if you decide to go for that instead. So in this case, you need to have Jest already installed. So npm install Jest Axe, and Jest environment -js-dom. There's a lot of J's in there. That's hard to say. So make sure you have these 3 packages installed. And then inside your test file, you can write a test like this. So you import Axe and to have no violations from the Jest Axe package. And then inside your test, you write it should have no accessibility violations. Then you render your app, you await the Axe to run on the document body, and then you expect it to have no violations. And if it has any violations, it will list those all for you so that you can go through and fix them before you even send your code up to GitHub and try to get it merged. So that was Jest. And now we'll talk about Playwright. Playwright, I'm going to talk about automatic testing and manual testing separately. So again, exactly the same as with Jest. There's a package for Axe for Playwright. It's called @axecore-playwright, and you can install it with npm. And I should say you can install all of these with yarn and pnpm and things as well. And this can actually scan whole pages, or it can just scan parts of pages, or it can scan components. It's up to you. And you run it as part of your end-to-end testing suite. And I have chosen Playwright instead of Cypress. I know Cypress is very popular, but Playwright is becoming more and more popular nowadays. And the idea, Playwright is also more like flexible than Cypress in terms of keyboard testing, which I think is a bonus here. So I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a few minutes. One of the good things with Playwright is you can also specify tags. So you can tell it, like if you're working in the US and you want to specify, I only need to be WCAG 2.0 compliant, you can just put in that I only want WCAG 2.0 A and AA, or you can choose like all of them. So it's up to you which level. If you want AAA conformance as well, you can add that in. You can disable specific rules. Like if you know that you've got certain issues that you can't fix right now, but will be fixed in the future, you can turn them off and then turn them back on again later. And you can export all of your scan results. And all of this can be found on the Playwright documentation. And it's very similar to how the Jest tests look. In this case, you import the Axe builder from the Axe core package. And then inside your test, you can also do should not have any automatically detectable accessibility issues. You await the page that you want to go to, and then you analyze your results with the new Axe builder. So this looks very, very similar to the Jest unit tests. But I think one of the bonuses with Playwright end-to-end test is you can actually do some manual testing and kind of make your life easier in that sense. And there's very few other testing tools that you can actually use to do manual testing. And so in the end-to-end testing, you can actually test things like keyboard activation, focus management, ARIA states and ARIA roles, and make sure, especially when you're building custom widgets, that you've got your ARIA states and roles in the right place, that your focus is being managed correctly, that you don't forget to add that you can activate things with the spacebar or the enter key if you can't use just a normal button. And as I said, there are a lot more keyboard testing possibilities than in Cypress, which is why I think Playwright is a good choice if you are going to start with a new project now and are trying to decide whether to choose Cypress or Playwright. I would definitely go with Playwright. So the nice thing is that Playwright has a keyboard API, and you can control it with all sorts of down, up, and press events. So one of the things that you might do is you might have a skip link, which is the first element in the tab order, and you want to test that. And obviously you can test it normally with just using the mouse, but this time we actually want to test that it works with the keyboard as well. So what we do is we go to our page that we want to test, and we press the tab key. And then obviously we're going to expect that our skip link is the first thing in the tab order and that we can see it, because when you press it, you want to be able to see it. So we're going to get hold of it. We get it by its role, its button, and its name. And then we're going to expect to see that skip link in the viewport because we've tabbed to it. And we're also going to expect that it is in focus. So this is a really nice way to test that your skip link is there, that it's doing what we expect it to do. We can also check that focus works on other things as well. If we use this skip link again as an example, when we actually click that skip link, we want the focus to move from the skip link to the main element. And we can test that with the mouse, but we also want to test it with the keyboard. So in this case, we go to our page that we want to test. We press the tab key to get to the skip link. Then we press the enter key to activate the skip link. Then we get hold of the main element by using its role. And then we expect that main element to be focused because we have activated the skip link with the enter key. And this is a really nice way to make sure that your buttons and things, even if you are using divs with on-click handlers, that you're actually remembering to add keyboard events to them as well. Or just that one thing that quite often happens here is you do move the focus to the main element, but you forget to add a tab index of -1 to the main element. And so although the computer tries to move the focus, it doesn't work because that tab index is missing. So that can also be another reason why this might fail. But if you've got a test for it, then you're less likely to break it in the future as well. And you can also use it to check ARIA states. So imagine that we've now got a profile button, and when you click that profile button, you get like a pop-up which gives you various options. And we've added ARIA expanded to that pop-up button. And we want to test that our ARIA expanded is actually working as we expect it, so that it's false when the button is closed and that it's true when that pop-up shows and the button is activated. And so what we can do is we can go to our page again. We can get hold of our profile button by using get by role and its name. We will first expect that profile button to have the attribute of ARIA expanded and its value to be false. Then we can activate it with the keyboard by pressing enter or space in this case because it is a button. And then we expect that our profile button now has an attribute of ARIA expanded with a value of true instead. So that's a really good way. I've seen really often that the ARIA expanded gets put on like the actual panel getting expanded itself, and then the false and true doesn't switch. So this is also a really good way to make sure that your ARIA attributes are working as you expect. And so, as I said, most of these are just ways of doing the automatic testing, apart from these few things that I've talked about at the end. So why you should include them instead of just going and doing like a wave evaluation or opening Microsoft Insights or an Axe DevTools. And the idea is that adding this into your software lifecycle at the beginning means that you're shifting everything left. You're finding and fixing these issues before they ever reach production, which means that disabled people are never having these barriers in the first place. So definitely recommend that you add these kind of things into your development processes so that you can fix these things. And if you can get, like, especially if you're part of a team, if you can even get them so that these are like blocking issues that you can't merge a pull request if you have failing tests like this, then that's such a big win for like accessibility. So yeah, that's basically my final thoughts. And I want to say thank you. I realize I have rushed through this. I feel a bit breathless now. So I hope I didn't talk too fast for everyone. There is a Q&A section that is open now. So I will give you time to add your comments there if you want to ask anything. And if anyone wants to ask questions, while you're writing, I'll just tell you that Julia will hopefully be back next month in June the 26th at 5 p.m. And she will actually be talking more about manual testing for accessibility enhancement. And there is all the session info and material will be on the gdg.community.dev/gdg-vienna site, and also the accessibilityfirst.at site @/webinar-series. And also our friend Laura, who was on last month, I think, she has an accessibility newsletter which goes out every month, which I can highly recommend, which lists like all the events coming up for the month at a11ynews.substack.com. So I can definitely recommend that. And now there is time for Q&A if anyone has any questions. And thank you, Carrie-Anne, for adding the link in the chat to those. Did I explain everything so well no one has any questions? I don't think. I'm just going to scroll back through the chat. I can't see anything else. Awesome. Well, if nobody else has any questions, then I guess we will finish off here. Thank you so much for the claps, Kathy and Laura. It was really nice to be able to come on and chat to everybody. I hope I've shared some information that you didn't know before, and I hope will be useful. Oh. Awesome. Thank you, Gitte and Claudia. I hope you have a really nice evening. And feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Emma Dawson Dev, I think, is my username. I didn't put any of that up here, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions that come to you afterwards as well.